If, is everybody comfortable with English? Okay, so if there's something you don't understand, just raise your hand and say that again, please. I speak with a Southern accent, so I'm not necessarily the English that you might be used to. So I'm honored to be with you today. I tell everybody I'm 80 years old, and as I reflect on my life, it's been an extremely good one. I walked behind mules on my grandfather's farm, pulled an 8-foot cotton sack down a rope, picking cotton, served in combat in the U.S. Marine Corps in Vietnam. Worked for IBM for 18 years and then left them to start my own business. Built that business office in 7 countries and 400 and something people, and sold that in 97 and retired to just do things that I believe have social benefit. So at some point in time, there will be a measure of my life that says, did I do things of social benefit? I tell everybody that I tend to approach problems different than what most people do because I haven't been trained in any discipline. So when I see a problem, I haven't been trained in a way that says I know how to fix it. So I tend to go to the person with the problem and say, can you make me understand your problem? I was extremely honored to shake President Obama's hand in Cuba. One of the greatest honors of my life. So when we look at food security, it's kind of ironic that, as I say, food security is a cultural issue. It's an economic issue. Agricultural issue. The American Department of Agriculture wouldn't spend $160 billion giving away food. So we have one of the greatest agricultural engines in the world, supposedly, but we can't produce food that poor people can afford. So that really tells you that the issue is not agriculture. It's really economic models. So I tell everybody in the history of capitalism, there has never been a version of it that built anything for poor people. That's not capitalism. You got to make a bunch of money off of it. Yet I tell everybody, born in 1943 and 20 miles from the closest city, and in those days most people didn't own a car. So that was a long way. And so the economy was really a local economy where everybody in the community shared and made money off of everybody else. So it was a different, wasn't the form of capitalism that we have today. I tell a story about that I learned from my grandfather. I noticed he always put the blinders on the mule when we were plowing. And I asked him one day, why do you put blinders on the mule? And he said, well, so they can only see the road they're working on. That's the way we are today. So I say, we all need to take the blinders off and not just focus on the things that we know and we understand. From the things I've understood, food security challenges are going to get worse because of several things. It seems that in most countries we have already low and falling per capita income for the families, and that seems to be getting lower in most countries. We're producing less food that ends up on the table. Minimum access to finance. And yet 50 to 80% of the food produced that's consumed, right, that people live off of, is produced by farmers without mechanization, farmers with hand tools. And all of that's going to get worse because of the geopolitical environment and climate change disruption. So we're sitting with a problem that, in my mind, as optimistic as I try to be, it's only going to get worse. So try as we may, we can't fix global capitalism. It's got that basic inherent problem that it pushes the money to the top. So capitalism is about producing product for the middle income and above. Yet today's technology would allow us to build an economic model parallel to the, I mean, we're always going to need the global economy. The truth is, it produces the things that will allow us to create another economic model. So in the early 1990s, World Trade Organization created a treaty that's called the Technical Barriers to Trade Treaty. And that was all of the major corporations get together because they all realized they made a lot of the same parts. And so they wanted to standardize them so they could move the production to the lowest cost of production country and have standard parts that they could use. That is what created the capability to build a parallel economic model that leaves the money where the value is added. But it's also going to require some significant changes in how we educate. But if you look at education today, and I've had conversations in the United States with numerous presidents of universities, and I ask them, do you believe the global economic divide is the cause of most of our problems? And they all agree. And then I say to them, do you understand you're making the problem worse? And they can't understand that. They say, no, we're training kids to get good jobs and have the skills needed. I said, yeah, but you're training them to get jobs with global corporations. You're training them to leave the local economy. So you're making it worse. So we have to focus on, we're going to create a new economic model. We have to understand that the university is the cornerstone for creating that economic model. But again, I say that one of the key things that we have to do is understand how global companies, what makes them successful, and we need to copy as many things from them as possible. So look at Apple, one of the most valuable companies in the world. They produce products that 70% of the world's population can't afford. If you look at smartphones, only 30% of them are Apple. 70% of them are low-cost Android phones. Yet Tim Cook makes $99 million. Tim Cook made $99 million. Apple stockholders last year had a 36% return on their investment. So again, go back and look at John Deere. It's the same thing as Apple, right? So John Deere's the same as Apple. And because of the nature of, they all have product architecture. John Deere last year got sued in America for right to repair because farmers would get John Deere's tractor and it would break and it would be 2 months before John Deere could fix it. So they sued John Deere for the right to repair. So Apple is still fighting right to repair. So global corporations, not only do they not create products for the poor, they create products to lock you in so that you have to come back to them for more revenue. Global capitalistic business model creates the economic divide. The economic divide is going to get worse. COVID pandemic, there are going to be more. Climate change, and the geopolitical environment. So countries at the bottom of the economy are in trouble. Okay? But the key thing is there is a way out of it, right? And that requires the creation of a new economic model. When it parallels the global model because we need it to have the second model. But it has to be an engineering model where engineers focus on the issues, not on building a product. So we have to change the entire focus how we look at things. Corporations, it's all about lock you into them, create more money. If we're going to have a local economy, it has to be totally different from that. So we have to change the way we teach engineers. So we're teaching them how to build products, create margin. We have to teach them to focus on problems. So the thing, starting 4 years ago, I had the opportunity after I shook President Obama's hand, I could pick up the phone and call people and they would welcome me and talk to me. So I talked to probably 20 university presidents, department heads, and I presented to them these concepts. It says we need to change the way we educate. We need to have two systems. We need to, when the young people get ready to come to college, we need to ask them, do you just want to get a job working for a big company and have a safe job for the rest of your life and make a good living? Or do you want to take a risk and participate in building a local economy and having your own business? We need to have two systems. And all the conversations that I had with all these heads of universities, they would agree that we needed to do that. But none of them want to do it. They don't want to take the risk. So they get too much. I had one president of a university, agricultural university in America, that agreed with everything I said, but then said I can't do it. And I asked him why. And he said, I get too much money from John Deere. Okay? So changing the mindset is going to be difficult. But if we believe, we can do it. When I was in combat in Vietnam, I told my commanding officer one time that something was impossible. And he said to me, Clemens, if it's impossible, you're dead. And that's how we all need to look at it. There's nothing that's impossible. If there's something that we know is the right thing to do and it needs to be done, we can't take no for an answer. So let's take a look. So here's an example of somebody using a different model. Everybody, I think, has heard of Raspberry Pi, right? So these are some guys in the UK that believe that every underprivileged child should have access to a computer. So they created a business model that didn't have executive pay, that didn't have stockholders, and their company now is valued at, I forget how many billions. The but they leave the money where the value is added. So they created a platform architecture that says with these parts, anybody can build their own computer. And so they've sold more computers than anybody else in the world. But they don't have executives and they don't have stockholders. So they've proven that they can do it. Right? So I've done the same thing. So when I looked at the problem, I said, okay, so what do you need to succeed? Well, you need to be a little bit creative. You need to have opportunity, and you need to have access to finance. So I said, well, I can't loan everybody money, but I can create a system of doing things that requires very little money. So I have built and sold tractors all over the world. I have one employee. Because I used a model that said the community builds the tractor. So I looked at somebody that was supplying agricultural parts. And I said, I need you to get these parts. So I designed a tractor using all off-the-shelf parts. Because I already knew that John Deere doesn't make hardly any of what goes in a tractor. Elon Musk doesn't make hardly anything that goes into his cars. He builds, what does he do that makes him successful? He found a cheaper way to build bodies, cheaper and faster. He took the risk and proved to everybody electric works. And he does all the software. But the rest of it is an assembly job of pieces and parts. So I said, okay, if we're going to have that parallel economy, we're going to have to look at engineering differently. So I said, okay, so I'm going to look at engineering differently. Okay, agriculture, food supply. You got farmers, right? And you got the jobs that farmers do. Okay, so if you're going to develop an architecture as an engineer, the architecture needs to cover the span farmer type. John Deere builds a product for this, and a product for this, and a product for that. I said, no, if we're going to solve the problem at the low end of the economy, we have to have an architecture that starts at the bottom. So I said, okay, farming is divided into hand tool farmers, minimum mechanization farmers, and full mechanization. Okay, so I need a tool carrier for hand tools, I need a tool carrier for minimum mechanization, and I need a tool carrier for full mechanization. So those are the pictures you see up there. Tool carrier for hand tools, a tool carrier for a two-wheel tractor. So the other piece of the architecture is the implement architecture. So across all of those tool carriers, they use a common toolbar. So that the planter that you use with the hand tool is the same one you use with minimum mechanization, except you use 2 or 3 of them. When you go full mechanization, you use up to 5 of them. Now, the other key point of the architecture for the low end of the economy is that you don't build something for obsolescence. So if you look at my 4-wheel tractor, I designed it such that the electrified, it can be done in the field. So technology, your architecture has to assure that technology is field upgraded. So there are already people electrifying my tractor. Matter of fact, there's a project in Ethiopia to electrify my tractor. So you understand problem is farming, and farming is made up of types of farmers and types of jobs. Those are the things that I tried to do. I already covered this, right? And that's farming. Types of farmers and types of jobs. From there, you create your architecture. These are the things that you have to ensure that you provide for. But the key point is that if we look at the farmers, the hand tool farmers, they're like my grandfather. He farmed with mules. He put a whole bunch of crop in the root cellar so we'd have food to eat in the wintertime. And he didn't want to change how he farmed because he knew how he farmed last year was what got the family by last year. So we need to stop telling farmers how to farm, and we need to start asking them what do they need to make their life better, right? So we look at their practices, and then we take this hand tool carrier and say, okay, that planting that you're doing, here's a device you can afford that will make the planting easier for you. And that cultivating that you're doing with the hoe, here's a way you can do that that's a whole lot less labor intensive. So we don't tell him how to farm. We ask him, what can we do to make his life better? I'm not trying to sell him. So this is kind of an architectural picture. I say, okay, as you start doing things, you start at the bottom. You start with the human connection. And then how does your human interface with the power source that you're using? In some cases, that power source is human. And then what's your tool carrier? And then how does that interface to everything you do, your job, all the jobs. So it's just about building a clear architecture with the delineating layers and set some standards. So back up to the tractor. So that tractor on the right hand side, I built that with all off-the-shelf parts. And when I sell it to somebody, I give them the bill of material. This shows every vendor that I bought my part from, the price that I paid for it, so that so they know most of it they can source locally. In the 7 years that I've been building tractors, I may have had one or two people call me and say, Horace, ship me this part because at your price, the price you get plus the shipping, you can get it cheaper than I can buy it locally. But nobody calls me, okay? So I've been building tractors for 7 years, and I don't get maintenance calls. I don't get problem issues because it's open source. I don't put a logo on the tractor. Why don't you put a logo on the tractor? It's your tractor. Put your logo on. So I do everything I can to ensure that the customer knows they have the independence to do whatever they want with the tractor. Those are things that are key. But let's go look at say, okay, so what is my goal? So when people ask me, what am I trying to do? Well, I'm trying to create an environment to enable each country to produce all the goods and services needed for the well-being of their people. Right? You can't do that if you don't produce it. So the creation of a different economic model is the only way we can do it. So if we look at government, in that story that I told you about, the U.S., right? USDA makes farmers so super efficient that they spend $160 billion every year giving poor people food because they've made the food that farmers produce cost so much poor people can't afford. So they, as an entity, the departments tend to focus more on how do they run their department. USDA thinks they're very efficient. And within the scope of some of the things they've been chartered to do, they are efficient. But they were never chartered to ensure that poor people could always afford food. They were chartered to increase the volume production per acre. One of the USDA, heads of USDA in the 50s told all the farmers, get big or get out. That has been repeated all over the world. And so that creates an environment where the USDA has to give away $160 billion worth of food. So where do we start? We create a local version of the global capitalistic model. We learn from what the current capitalistic model does, and we don't make their mistakes. So where I've come to, global corporations have an enterprise headquarters that plans how they make all the money, right? Plans what they do. And that's how they're successful. Analyze their market and create their products that generate greater margins. So if the local economy doesn't have a corporate headquarters, each local business how he survives. Somebody's got to look at the overall environment. So my view is we change the educational system so that the leading business school becomes responsible for the local economy. This one takes time to go through. So business school becomes look at the low end of the economy. So say, how do we ensure that what we produce in this country can be afforded by? So the model that I set up for the tractor, I said one into we don't design. If we don't design things so that they could be made locally, then we're not going to fix it. But by creating that manufacturing capability in the village, in the lowest level of the economy, we start to build up that. I mean, that's the things I saw in my lifetime when in America in the 40s, right? In the 40s, agriculture was the key engine of the American economy. It was the key engine of the American economy up until the 60s. And so that's where everything else, all the support services around improving agriculture is what helped the American economy grow and become what it is. So that can be repeated by focusing on how do you build all of the things to support agriculture within the local economy. And so universities are all trying to figure out how do they do the supply chain and how do they do cold storage, and how to do all these other things. And I say, gee, when I was growing up, none of that existed because it was all produced close to home, right? So we need to look at how do we create that economy where we produce more and better things. But today, truly, with what happened because of the technical barrier trade treaty, anything you want to build, look at where China was 50 years ago. How did they transport their goods to market? Bicycles, right? And so the other thing, the engineering, so we need to look at the local economy and say, what are the forms of transportation that we need that the people can afford? And then so then the university, the engineering department needs to come up with an architecture for 2, 3, and 4-wheel transportation. And then pull the parts off the shelf to build them locally. In America, electric bikes cost anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000. You could build it yourself for $500 to $800. Right? So if you look at the picture of the hand tool carrier, think back to that. Okay, what happens if the guy doesn't want to move up to the 2-wheel tractor? He likes what he's got. The first thing that we're going to offer as an upgrade is electric bike hubs. The cheapest parts for mechanization that you can buy because electric bikes are becoming so proliferate. So by building the architecture where the power source is independent, I can go from bicycle wheels that don't have an electric motor on them because they're so much cheaper. But if the guy wants to double his land and he says I could do it if I didn't get so tired pushing this thing, I said, fine, just buy an upgrade and change the wheels out. Put electric wheels on it. That's the benefit of architecture. So going back to how the school works, business, the transportation, okay, build the transportation that poor people can afford. If it's bikes they pedal, if it's electric bikes, if it's 3-wheel bikes, if it's some rudimentary version of a, they call them in Asia tut-tuts or something like that. I mean, so you look at transportation. In Cambodia, and the transportation I see is not as many trucks as it is those vehicles with beds on them. So again, it's all about somebody driving what gets built. That's the business school. And then push that off to the other schools to implement. All right. Okay. Anybody got any questions for me? Okay.
Allô?
I'm done.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It was quite inspiring. I'm just curious to know if when you're sharing your architecture, I mean, when you're building your tractor, if you have an idea of how much less it costs, and maybe in terms of how efficient. Let's say if I want to take your concept to agriculture in Africa, I would try to tell them that this is this much less expensive and this is
if you look at what's happened,
Yeah.
so if you look at how tractors are built today, all of the implements are attached to the back because they're built for big farmers to have guidance and just go down the row and plant punch. There's nothing built for small farmers anymore. So so the structure that I use, I copied the model used by Alice Chalmers when they built cultivating tractors and small farm tractors in the 40s. And it was the best small farm tractor built. If you look at all the tractors for when agriculture was small farms, they were built. John Deere built. I mean, Alice Chalmers built one that had the motor in the back, so that you could look between your feet and see your crop, so that you could make sure you weren't cultivating your crop up.
Yeah.
All the rest of the tractor manufacturers offset the seat to one side so that you could see most of it, but you had to really lean over to see under the motor. So this tractor is functionally different from anything out there. It is built to satisfy the farmer that produces table food.
Okay.
It's not produced for corn and wheat.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's also another practical practical step we need to understand from African point of view. It's just that, let's say if I take the example of Senegal, what is happening right now is maybe you get one guy rich enough to buy a tractor and then renting it to the village.
The service business.
Yeah.
That's really driven by the price of tractors. Yeah. But still, even, and so that's why I said, okay, I'm going to have a hand tool carrier, a minimum mechanization, and a full. And no matter what you do with full automate with a 4-wheel tractor, you're not going to get it at a price point that greater than 20% of the farmers can afford.
Yeah.
All right. And so the service business is going to be one of the ways you're going to proliferate. The 2-wheel tractor, I believe you can get it to a price point that you can probably address maybe up to 50%. And the hand tool carrier, you can get it to address 80 to 90% of the farmers. So that's what I said. You've got to have an architecture that understands farmer type. Right? So people always come to me and say, well, all of John Deere's tractors, they tell you to buy a 4-wheel tractor. I said, you know why they do that? Because all the weight is over the front wheels. So I designed a tractor where all the weight is centered over the axle, and I've got more traction than they have with a 4-wheel drive tractor. Right? So it's all about how do you design things. But, so you understand, this is, and the other thing I said, I sell an engine, and I'm now selling the tractors with a 34 horsepower engine. Put whatever engine you want on it. I don't care. I mean, you can put a 50 horsepower engine. So most of the questions that people ask me about performance and will it do this, I say, make it do what you want it to do. It's open systems. It's structured so that if you want to put a different engine on it, put a different engine on it.
And also for someone just understanding a little bit open sources. So are you open to other people updating your architecture, let's say?
Okay, so I'd give the design away for free.
Yeah.
And I put one stipulation on it, that if you modify it, you will give me your modifications back so that I can publish them.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, that's good.
So I'd say I'll give the design for free to anybody that wants it, but you have to sign a document that says if you modify it, you'll give me that back so that I can publish it, so that anybody can use it. So I give Douse the plans for the tractor with no strings attached.
Yeah, I also believe that even we need more than tractors in Africa context
No.
for transformation, right?
But again, let's take one of the critical issues. As I got older, one time I asked my mother, because I remember the house we had only one light bulb. And so I was about 50 years old, and I went back. I said, Mama, if we only had one light bulb, why did we have electricity? And she said, well, that's a good question. She thought about it. She came back a few days later, and she said, we had a refrigerator. For health and safety, everybody needs a refrigerator. Now, anybody today could build a refrigerator with off-the-shelf parts. Refrigeration technology has not changed hardly any in the last 50 years. And all of the parts are there. So if your engineering department put forward an architecture for refrigeration from the smallest household unit to commercial units, you could build refrigerators in the village. Refrigeration built in the village would be easier than building the two-wheel tractor. So again, it's about having the university focus on the problems, and refrigeration is one of the problems in rural areas. Okay? So you understand? I fully understand. So one of the mottos of our business is, it's not a tractor, it's a way of thinking.
Thank you. We can see that it comes from the heart. From it. I wish you were much younger, because I think there are still a lot to achieve with the vision that you have. As my colleague just asked, I think we are wondering just how can all this vision, I talk about vision, not only the product, but vision, can be really implemented in our communities, because we are just where you are. You don't need to get things that are costly or that are not useful, but we need things, especially for our groups. I work for women's communities, and we know every single day that we could buy things cheaper if they are more applicable to our needs only. The tractor you show is an example. But in terms of mechanization, I think there are many, many tools that we need to think how best it could be adaptable in our community setting, and not something that we get from elsewhere. So I don't know, are you partnering with groups that are locally here? Are you planning to bring your license to Africa or to Senegal? Or because I think it's beyond universities, because it's really a mindset. It's beyond, because I think our business schools are not interested, as you rightly say, they are not interested in developing things that are not building the economy. We have to be honest.
I'm going to Zimbabwe from here. I've been working with some people in Zimbabwe for 4 or 5 years now. And I understand what you're saying. And so one of the things that I believe, so the Gates Foundation and all of these other NGOs, so USAID, so I got to know at one time the guy that was the head of USAID, and he kept saying, Horace, you need to submit a grant request on one of our grant requests. I said, okay, I'll look at it. So I looked at it, and I called him up and said, Jerry, I can't do this. And he said, why not? I said, you're telling me what you want me to do. You're not letting me tell you what you need to do. He said, okay, so, well, he called me back later and said, well, we got this other kind of grant that's more flexible. But the problem is that what we need to do is some of what I started trying. So I submitted with the university in Zimbabwe a grant request to USAID. And I told the guy, Jerry, that was the head of, I said, it's going to get rejected because in it, one of the first things, in as nice a way as I possibly could, I said, you go about everything wrong. And what we're telling you in this is not your normal way of doing business. And basically, in a nice way, I was saying, I know you're going to reject it. So they did. But there are things that we could advocate that would then get us that money. So if we could go within the government, so it should be fairly easy to get the Minister of Agriculture to understand that if there was a standard architecture for mechanization, your country would be better off. And so if he could then start advocating, so you got to reach into the NGOs and say, guys, you got to ask them, have you solved any problems? Okay. And so you got to get them to understand that they need to be more open to how they, if the NGOs, if the government would say anything that comes into this country has to meet this standard, everything would change. But if you could get an NGO to understand the real approach, then you could get money. So what we had hoped in Zimbabwe was to get enough money to go around the world and get professors to come over to assist. So to build the skills of the university. Right? So the answer is turning some of these NGOs around so that you get some of their money to strengthen the university so that it can become the enterprise headquarters for the local economy. Because, I mean, I understand. Huh?
So to answer your question, we are one of the, the first university which Mr. Horace Clement worked with. So actually, we already built two of the tractors you see here. Yes. So one of them was exposed in the stand over there from our university, Daust. So actually, just a quick story about it. So when we built the first one, so the Journal Soleil, he came and do a big picture, yes, and put it on the newspaper, and the news spread all around the country. So Anwar is one of the main characters for this news, and everybody was reaching out me, asking me how did you build it, etc., etc. And after that, USAID, they found us about 5 million de francs CFA to 5 millions, yes, to improve the prototype. And then actually, we have built the second prototype because everybody was wondering where is the project, the status of the project. And people was asking, so we want to have one of your prototype, when are you going to sell it, etc., etc. So we did a lot of research to improve the design of the tractor so that it can adjust with the need that farmers actually need. Yes, we tried the first one. Yes, we tried the first prototype, and it works. And what is interesting about it is you can put any type of implement unit depending on the type of the work you want to do. So depending on the design of the tractor, you can also think about how your implement will look like, and it will adapt on your prototype actually. So yeah, for the cost, now the cost for a prototype cost much more than the final product. So on the the first prototype we spent around 2,500,000, but we know that yes, if we want to do mass production, we'll spend less actually. So actually, we were working with ISRA, there are some engineers there that helping us for the about the research, etc. And also for the homologation. Also.
Yeah. Yeah. But so we did center of gravity load adjustment so that based on whatever implement you put on, you can move the center of gravity up, over, front of the wheels or back of the wheels so that you make it easier for the operator. But one of the discussions that I will be having before I leave is the discussion you were talking about. Okay, so how do we figure out the best way to get the price to the lowest point? And so while we designed it so that the local blacksmith can make all of the parts, it still may be cheaper to find, well, to find somebody that has the latest technology for fabrication and just have them cut a whole bunch of pieces and then give it to the local blacksmith for him to put it together. So those are the discussions that I will have while I'm here is, okay, so what do we believe is the best business model to start with? But again, I always tell everybody that the only really important thing is that we agree on where we're going. In everything I've ever done in life, I say, okay, this is where I'm going. This is what I want to accomplish. And then I don't ever think beyond the first step. Okay? Because you take that first step when you're doing something brand new. That's when you understand what your second step should be. So where we're going today, we can't plan everything about how to get there. You understand what I'm saying? When I ran my business, and kids would come in and ask me, well, what are we going to do about this problem? What are we going to do about that problem? I would smile and say, I solve the problems I have today. And when I do that, the problems that you think I'm going to have, I probably won't even have. Right? So we have to focus. We're doing something entirely different. There is no roadmap. We need to agree on where we want to go. I believe where we want to go is to create a center where we can provide all basic needs of all the people. And that's something that's never been done. Nobody knows how to do it. Say, okay, let's agree on the first step. And let's do that. Okay? And I will answer a WhatsApp call as long as you call. Oh, okay, so don't call me. I get up at 5, 6 every morning. Don't call me until after 6. Call me. Go to bed. Okay? But have my phone number, my WhatsApp ID, you got my email address. But I mean, we can do this, all right? We can do it. had a company in South Africa that costed building my tractor. Okay, and my price at that time, I think, was $12,000. I mean, this was 3 years ago or something. And their price for building one was less than $6 because they get to build direct from China and they get a better price, and their labor price is low. So, so that I say, look, I give the bill of material. That's supply chain. That's research that needs to be done here. And on the two-wheel tractor, we've made some other modifications to the design that they haven't. So the issues that we had were some of the stress on the driver, and we fixed that. So there's design changes that they haven't implemented yet to take care of the stress on the operator issue.
Just to add something, do you know that we can move from two-wheelers to four-wheeler just by doing some few modification, because it's modular, so we can add part.
Okay.
But I know this guy here is actually working on that, right? He's actually taking engines, thermal engines, and swapping them with electrical one. And in a long-term view, I feel like electric makes more sense for our farmers because we have sun. If we have solar, what they do also, long-term view, in terms of cost, that's more sustainable for us.
Yeah, but again, and I make people mad when I say this because I talk to a lot of academia, right?
Yeah.
And I say, in academia, you really know more than I know. And you try to make sure everybody does what you know. And that doesn't work. You need to focus on, so electric will be the dominant method at some point in time. But that time has not come. Okay? So farming is, okay, so I asked a farmer one time when I could call him, and he said, the hours are 24 and the days are 7. Okay? That's farming. You farm when Mother Nature lets you farm. So if you're going to be electric, you got to be able to run for 24 hours. Because the farmer may do 12 hours and his wife may do 12 hours because Mother Nature let them farm then. So electric is at a price point, it's still years away. It's in my mind, but I find academia all over the world pushing it for agriculture. And I say, well, I mean, some people can afford it. And
but one problem we have also is gas is quite expensive also here. Right?
I understand. But again, let's back up and look. Let's see if you agree with me on this. So in Senegal, what percentage of the food is produced by people using hand tools? 50 to 80%? Okay.
But
And I say, then
I guess it's not that much, yeah.
But I mean, my survey is that across Africa, it's at least 50% of the food that's consumed is produced by small farmers using hand tools. In some countries, and I say, guys, let's just focus on the problem that we know is at least 50% of our problem. Let's focus on that. The other will come with time. But what's the problem we're trying to solve? More food on the table. So do your own analysis for your country. and address the problem, not what's it you. Okay? I mean, I made a lot of money just solving my customers' problems. We had a discussion with people earlier today. They said, you gave your source code away? How did you make money? I said, I made money by listening. Okay? I mean, and the customer said he had a problem, and I always tell people, say, well, how do you set your prices? I said, I didn't. I let the customer set the price. I would listen to what problem he had. I would use the solution. Any other? About focusing on the problem. I mean, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that's a great, definitely a good point, and I think I agree with that in multiple way, because I feel like, so if I just give an idea of what we do,
Yeah.
We are I'm actually the CTO co-founder of Jaitu, which is the robotic company that Siri launched, and the idea of
Look, all that's the market, but understand it's not going to solve your food security issues. But it creates the technology that will eventually be the off-the-shelf components that apply to the low end of the market. So all that stuff I say, that's good, and I want all of that to continue. So all this research into robotics and electronics, it's necessary. It's not something I want to have anything to do with. Not the problem I'm trying to solve.
And I feel like it's more than research, because our goal really is to solve problems. And I agree with that when you're saying that what we're expecting from businesses, we are not research, we are not a research institution, we are not academia. We are a company that has a business to run. And the idea behind it is really to solve problems.
Yeah.
So now what we're building is not necessarily the most advanced robots, but it's mainly that what would actually help improve some like basic tasks we have in the farm. Let me give you an example. For example, I feel like seeding is something that is easy to automatize. For example, just looking at what is the process, it's something that you repeat every time, that actually, even if you automatize, you can have the opportunity to optimize it, because you will be able to have more precision. And you can do that without something big and costly. You don't need a tractor to do that. You can actually do it with a mechanism that is quite small, quite cheap, but that is efficient. And that is doing the job. If we see it this way, I am just thinking that we don't necessarily need to be reluctant of those innovation. We just need to adapt them. And I join you on that point, because that's really about solving problems. Whatever we use, it's just more about solving problems. So that's why our approach is more about, okay, we built a platform, we have capabilities, but our platform, for example, today is something we can use actually for different type of use cases. But we are not the one building the use cases. Most of the time, what we do is we have partners coming to us with their problems, their needs, and based on what we have, we tell them, okay, this is probably how we can help you. That's what we did with that we were doing with most of the other partners we have. But goal also is to do that for farmers. Our approach today is we started by building just based on our understanding of the problem, something. Today, I was glad to be able to talk to people that have the farming experience, researchers around it, some people with the data to give us actually the insight on how this could help them. And the follow-up to that would be testing it, like actually you're doing with the tractor, and trying to see how we can improve it. But my motto, I would say, is we don't need to build stuff that are expensive. Something can be efficient but not expensive. And the focus is also about how do you do something that can be simple, but is actually really efficient on solving one specific problem, and not trying to do everything at the same time. So the model behind it is actually exactly what you were talking about. And that's why I am thanking you for your speech, because that's actually really reflecting that vision, which is let's go straight to not thinking about integrating the high-end technologies, but just about doing enough for them to be able to solve a problem in a sustainable way.
But the key thing is that my focus is on producing more food, creating that economy around the small farmer, right? And so everything that I do is within that realm. How do I improve the life of the poor? But again, so one of the reasons people bicep fields there's spare bicep fields parts that makes it cheaper. More than that, that's where mechanization comes in because of the electric bike. So if you look at the evolution, so if we take the infant period and we make that like bike up, then it money he wants to go robotic. Then you've got all that platform. So yes, there's a different thought process that goes into how do I do something for big ag, because you just build a product. And I say, no, no, no. You upgrade a product that the farmer's already purchased. You follow what I'm saying? So there's just two different thought processes. Just choose which one you want to.
Definitely. And I think also what is helping a lot is what there is also a starting point, right? Here, when we take your design, it's a good starting point.
Yeah.
So people need to also do those kind of stuff, like giving the means for people to be able to easily improve or adapt. And the point is all about that, about putting together the infrastructures, the capabilities, so that people can just come in big and improve.
The manufacturer that I gave my design to in the Philippines is creating a version for rice paddies. Rice paddies. Rice again, that's that open systems design. Let everybody do what they want to. That's the only way we're ever going to reach the.
Thank you.